says, the Tanya. We were talking last time how a person wants to have a yichud, have a connection and bond with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. He needs to study Torah, do the mitzvot, and especially learn Halacha. So, Rav Yoram says now that when a person studies Torah and he learns all the different opinions, sometimes a person wants to just hear the bottom line. Rabbi, just tell me the bottom line. Why do I need to know what the Rambam says? I need to know what this one says, that one says. Obviously, each one of these giants of Torah, it's very important to know each opinion. But he says that even when you learn an opinion that we don't follow la halacha at the bottom line, still, even the hava amina, he says, even the initial thought that's rejected in the Gemara eventually, that initial thought, the process that Gemara mentioned, the hava amina, it also brings you closer to understanding and thinking like the Torah. So therefore, a person should not belittle, and he should not think that it's not important to learn the other opinions that are not accepted la halacha, or not. It's not important to learn the initial thought process of the Gemara, even though the bottom line they don't follow like that. As the Tikkun Zohar, there's a commentary Tikkun Zohar by the Ramchal, Tikkunim Chadashim. The Rav Yoram says that this is the pasuk says V'Hashem imo. It says about King David that Hashem was with him. So it says that it says the Ramchal that this title of Hashem is with him only applies to a person who is ish halacha, a person who is a halachic man, meaning he knows halacha very well. He says that it could be that you know a lot of Kabbalah, it could be that you know a lot of Gemara, it could be that you know a lot of Parashah, but the fact that you know halacha, that gets you the special status of Hashem imo, that Hashem is with you. As we know, like people like Gaon Rav Yoram, right? That he was Ish Halacha, Chatam Sofer, famously was known as Ish Halacha. Yehuda Yehuda, many great giants, Rav Yosef Karo, Ish Halacha, all these people who were experts in Halacha, the Hashem is with him. As that's a title that Tikkun Zohar says, the Ramchal says goes on them. Very famously, the meeting that Rav Ovadia Alav Shalom had with the Baba Sali, he wore all white to meet him, and he stood up when he saw him. So it's a special. The Baba Sali saw in him a special godliness, Hashem imo. And the Gemara says, the Sechet Sanhedrin, the Rav Yoram quotes, the Shaul HaMelech told Doega Adomi that the King David is very special, but really Yonatan, Shaul HaMelech's son, has all the same character traits and all the same good things that the King David has. So what's the difference between him and King David? Rather, King David, on him, it says Hashem was with him because he knows halacha. The Gemara says that King David was the halacha was always like him. So you see, the fact that he had the halacha on his side and he knew halacha, that's what made him Hashem imo. Hashem was with him. And also it says about King David, Ve'id David lechor derchav maskil. And King David in all his ways was successful. Why did he have this special siyat d'shmaya, help from above? Is because he knew halacha. It says the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, Rav Yoram says that Rav Yochanan, that the Rav Yochanan says, which Talmid Chacham can you make in charge of the community? So the Gemara says, Zeh shesholin oto dvar halacha b'chol makom ve'omer. It has to be a rabbi who knows halacha in every place in Shulchan Aruch and can answer you, or the answer afilu Masechet Kala, even in the laws of Masechet Kala, which is not such a well-known tractate in the Shas. Even on that, he's able to answer you. And this is considered the highest level of Torah learning. So therefore, if you want to make a rabbi in charge of the shul and the community, you should get a rabbi who knows halacha very much. Now, he could be a great speaker, or he could be a very a good advisor, or he could be he knows a lot of chidushim on different things. But the main thing is that he should know halacha, says Rabbi Yochanan, Masechet Shabbat Kuf Yudaled. So you see that that's the main thing. Now, the Rabbi Nachman writes in lesson 141. In lesson 6. That he says that a person has to be baki and halacha beratzov v'shov. A person has to know halacha very well, and he has to know it with in depth, not just surface layer, bottom line, right? He says it's called the angels were running and returning. So he says, what does that mean? He says that when you learn the Gemara and then afterwards you learn the halacha behind it and the bottom line, then you're considered a baki b'shov. You're considered an expert in returning. And when you learn halacha without Gemara, without the base, without the deeper understanding, so then you're only considered ratzah. You only consider running and returning. You have to be able to have both. You have to know the Gemarot and you have to know the halachot. Meaning, people who just study halacha. Let's say you learn Yalkut Yosef, but you don't know the reasoning behind it. Chas v'shalom, you might make similarities to other situations, and you think the halacha is the same in the other case, but you don't know the principles that are underlying this halacha, and those principles would make you understand that really that halacha doesn't apply to that other case you thought it does. So that's why it's important to know the Gemara also. The Gemara always breaks down everything, and the logic is very clear, and you know the nuances and details, and you know how each detail can change the case ever so slightly. So when you learn the Gemara and then you learn the halacha, it's considered that you're expert in running and returning. Okay, but sometimes people don't like Gemara. They say that Gemara is too much back and forth. It's theoreticals. It takes a long time to get to the bottom line, or there's digression and the side topics. But all these things are important at the end of the day. A person has to learn to be analytical, and a person has to know the intricacies of the halacha. And only once a person studies Gemara, then he'll be able to appreciate each detail, notice how the case changes very easily because of every detail. He knows how to think. He learns what's a question, what's not a question. He learns, how everything is really sourced. When you learn halacha without Gemara, sometimes you think like, the rabbis are making up as they go. Obviously not, and it comes from everything as a source, and the Gemara goes through all the sources and shows you how they arrived at those conclusions. So therefore he says, Mishi lo lomed Gemara, yesh lo chisaron ba'avat Hashem yitbarach. Someone who doesn't learn Gemara, you should know that there is a lack, you will have a lack of halal for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You'll not be able to go and have that connection that the people who learn Gemara do. So therefore he says, so there must be, they're weak. לא רוצים כל כך להתאמץ בהבנת דברי הגמרא תוספות, במקום זה מעדיפים לקרוא סיפורי מעשיות. A lot of times these people rather listen to stories, or they rather listen to a lecture. If you want milk, there's downstairs milk.
What's that?
There's downstairs milk. There's a kitchen there as well. So therefore he says that a person has to be careful to not fall into that trap of, there's people who like to learn only via lectures. They like to listen to lectures online, and they don't want to make an effort to go to a Gemara class, open the book, and learn inside. He says that'll affect you. That affects you tremendously in your yirat shamayim, in your fear of God. As he quotes the Ben Ish Chai in Parshat Shmini, he says, what is it similar, the Ben Ish Chai says, what is it similar to when a person knows a lot of stories but doesn't learn Gemara? So Rav Yoram says, he quotes the Ben Ish Chai, he says, it's a person who went to visit his friend. He was a guest at his friend's house. So the guest really enjoyed the food, really likes the food, how it looks when he served it to him. So he's interested, how do you prepare this food? How do you cook it? And they explained to him, it's because of the spices we added. A little bit of cumin, a little bit of pepper, and so on and so forth. So what happened? So the guy went home and he said, let's make a kal v'chomer now. If he put a little bit of cumin, a little bit of pepper, that means it tasted so good. What should I do? If I want to make it even better, I should put a kilo of cumin and a kilo of pepper, and that'll make it even better. And then what? He goes and makes the food and puts too many spices. Now he takes a bite, and now he can't even eat it. He choked from how unbearable it was. So we see that what? We see that a person who can mess it up like this. And what the Ben Ish Chai says, that this is the nimshal is that there's people who they know a lot of halacha and they know a lot of Gemara, and then every once in a while you put a little bit of spice. Sometimes the Gemara gets boring. That's true, so that's why the Gemara every once in a while a story comes up, or let's say a rabbi is giving a lecture. And he's giving the class, the Gemara class, and he throws in interesting story here and there. So he had a little bit of spice to the shear. So that's exciting, that's beautiful. Now the whole shear tastes very yummy. The food has a little bit of spice, appropriate amount of spice. It tastes amazing. Well, what happens if you only hear stories and lectures without actually reading inside and learning inside the actual meat and potatoes, as they say, of the Gemara? So then it's just like you put a kilo of spices on the food. You won't be able to eat anything. That what? If the darshan, if the speaker, and only stories, right, and no Gemara or no real sources, So then what? So then they eventually the people will not be able to bear it anymore. A lot of people who only listen to lectures, they get tired of listening to lectures. They're not growing from the lectures. They get sick of it. The taste, the spices are too much, and there's no real content. There's no real meat and potatoes inside. So therefore, he says another interesting thing, very dangerous. He's about teshuvah. Sometimes people make teshuvah, and they become a speaker. They become a person who's doresh b'fnei tzibur. Rav Yoram says, and he's medaber marbe atzabim. He goes and he speaks with a lot of anger. He smacks the table. He threatens people, and he says Rav Yoram is because he has no yediyah in Gemara. He says this is because there's no Gemara in his class. It's just stories and conjecture, and talking about what's going to happen if you do this, what's going to happen if you do that. And he says that a lot of times people were baalei teshuvah, shomea eze davar, miyad hu tzoek oto le'achirim. He hears some scary statement, he just yells it right away to other people. And it doesn't come from his pnimiyut, it doesn't come from his innermost part of his soul. And he didn't really acquire it himself, and he sells it to others. So therefore he says, that's why you have to not mizalzen in learning Gemara. That's why you have to learn Gemara. Someone who learns Halacha without Gemara, he's going to be lacking in his love of Hashem and Chas V'Shalom love of others. So therefore, the Ri writes, one of the Baalei Tosafot, he says that the Rif had Ruach HaKodesh, because the Rif took the Gemara, and he wrote only the halachot that came out from the Gemara. He skipped all the parts of the Gemara that are not bottom line related. So therefore, the Ri says, how can you do that? You have to have Ruach HaKodesh to be able to do that, because otherwise you should learn the entire Gemara. All the Gemara is needed. So therefore, Rav Yoram says the Chachamim of the previous generations, when they used to give a darash, when they used to give a speech, they would always bring up a Gemara, ask a lot of questions on the Gemara, and then slowly afterwards they would go and answer those questions, and through those questions that they would answer, they would bring answers for it. You would learn a lot of musar. It would bring a new light to that Gemara, and then the whole kahal would already be in tears, and how beautiful and how deep there was the musar. To give a speech. Even to give a speech, it has to, it used to be an art. It's an art to have depth to it and have meaning to it, have content, to be able to bring a new light to the same words that you used to always read, and now you understand them in a different way. The art of speech is difficult, but it's a very beautiful thing if done properly. And we're losing it. We're losing it because we have a lack of attention ability. We're not able to pay attention for so long. But also on top of that the speakers are also, the speakers have to give a lot of content. They can't just say stories and that happens to be that the one leads to the other. The lack of content leads to lack of attention. The lack of attention leads to lack of content. But a person has to be able to, let a speech build, let it have content, and let questions on, and then lead to an answer, and follow along the entire time. So therefore, he says that's why it's important to learn Gemara. Gemara is also the concept of building up. Gemara is also the concept of not just skipping to the bottom line, being able to pay attention. So therefore, he says that the base for halacha is Gemara. Without knowing the Gemara, you won't be able to know how they cooked up the halacha. He says there's a story. We'll end with this. There's a story where one merchant, he went to the ferry, to the boat, to go to the fair, and then because there was so much snow, he got there 2 weeks late. He wasn't able. He missed the ferry. He missed the boat, and he was very angry. And on the wagon driver, and he said, "Oh, you got there very late. What's wrong with you? I'm not paying you." And he said, "What do you mean? It's not my fault that the snow came. It's you hired me. I did what I could, and I did my job." So then they went to court, and he didn't want to pay. He says, "You're going to pay." So they go to the rabbi. They go to Bedin. And they say, "Listen, Rabbi, this guy doesn't want to pay. He hired me to drive him the wagon, and he didn't want to pay me." So he said, "Listen, what do you want?" They made a condition. The guy hired you. He said, "Listen, I want you to drive me to this ferry, to this boat, and so I can get there to the fair on time. And if you don't take me there on time, I'm not paying you." He made that condition explicit. It's written in writing. So the owner of the wagon, he said, "No, what are you talking about? This halacha, where did you get this from?" He said, "Shulchan Aruch." And he said, "Where does Shulchan Aruch come from?" "From the Gemara." And where did the Gemara come from? It was from Moshe and Sinai. So he said, listen, when did Moshe give the Torah? Moshe gave the Torah in Sivan. It was the summer. He says, listen, Rabbi, if Moshe would have gave the Torah in the winter, and he would have saw the snow we have, then he would have said differently. He would have made the Torah different. So therefore, this halacha doesn't apply today. So he says, you see, says the Rav Yoram, this story shows a person who doesn't learn halacha, doesn't learn Gemara. Look what he thinks. He thinks that the Moshe Rabbeinu decided the halacha based on the weather. And if he would have saw the snow, he would have changed it. Obviously not. Obviously, HaKadosh Baruch Hu determined what the Torah says, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu made it that it's the truth spiritually, nothing to do with what's physically going on. So therefore, you see how a person can make a grave mistake, and he thinks the rabbis have something against him. He thinks that the rabbi had a bad coffee this morning, and that's why he made the halacha that way. And it's not true. And it's not true. And they have to know that everything's sourced. You have to start learning the sources, and you'll see that you'll be able to connect to the source, HaKadosh Baruch Hu.